My mom is being evicted for violating her apartment's no dog policy. She has no dog. The trouble started when a really nice lady moved into the apartment across the hall. Mrs. Armstrong, she lets me and my mom call her Amanda because she likes us, is in her 70s and used to be a nurse. The day we met, she invited us over for chili con carne. My mom said Amanda was a dying breed and that very few people acted so neighborlip anymore. As I wolfed the chili down, Amanda mentioned her planned trip to Amsterdam. Mom joked she should visit the sex museum to get some inspiration. Don't you mean torture museum? Amanda replied, laughing. I didn't really get the joke. After the meal, Amanda cleared our plates. I excused myself to use the bathroom, but opened the wrong door. That's how I met Benji. Benji is a blonde Pomapoo, which is a type of dog. He chased me down the hall, growling and barking. Luckily, Mom zipped over in a flash. She used to train special dogs that help blind people, which meant animals loved her. If she walked into a lion's den, the lions would probably roll over and ask her to scratch the soft fur on their bellies. As she petted Benji, I ate chocolate cake. Mom always said I should try being nice by asking people questions, so I asked Amanda about a picture on the wall, and her eyes went misty. I asked Mom if I did something wrong, but Amanda promised everything was okay. She said the picture was of her daughter, who got sick and died a long time ago. Like Amanda, the girl was very pretty, except she had red hair, not white. Mom got choked up telling Amanda about my dizzy spells and migraines. Because I got brainstorm clouds every few weeks, I couldn't move out after I finished school, but Mom explained how I always help with the bills. A nice man called Mr. McCann owns a hotel nearby, and he lets me work in its restaurant sometimes. Mr. McCann doesn't have a problem with me taking time off whenever I'm sick. I'll admit I'm very lucky to have Mom. She always helps nurse me back to health. After Amanda told us about her daughter, she stayed quiet for a while. To make her feel better, I said, "Don't be sad. I can tell from how much Benji loves you, your daughter was lucky to have you as a mother." After that, Amanda gave me an extra piece of cake. "Oh, one more thing," she said as she walked us to the door. "Please don't mention Benji to anybody. The landlord, Mr. White, was friendly, but he didn't like animals." Mom promised her secret would be safe with us. And then back home she said, "That was a nice thing you said back there." Sometimes Mr. White lived in the apartment below ours. He worked as a doctor, but owned a bigger house in the country, so he only stayed there whenever he got too tired to drive home. Mom said this was good because having somebody stomp around downstairs would make my migraines worse. Mr. White also let us pay our rent late if we didn't have much money that month. In January, Mr. White died of a heart attack. This made me sad because he always left us treats and a nice card on Christmas. Mom told me his son, a man also called Mr. White, inherited the property and that she hoped nothing would change. The day the moving vans appeared, Mom and Amanda looked nervous. Knew Mr. White planned on living downstairs all the time. This meant Amanda needed to keep Benji inside and only take him for walks when she knew the coast was clear. I said knew Mr. White might have liked animals more than his dad, but Mom said sometimes it's better to keep your mouth shut about these things. To reach our apartment, you needed to go through the main hall and up a set of stairs beside Mr. White's door. And the day after he moved in, he came out just as me and Mom arrived with our shopping bags. He kept asking Mom if she had a husband. Then he pointed at me and said, "What's his problem?" "He doesn't have a FING problem," Mom shouted, her face all red. Then she dragged me upstairs. I said Mr. White must be super friendly because friendly people ask people questions, but she said he didn't have friendship on his mind. I asked why Mr. White thought I had a problem, and she grabbed my hands and said, "There's nothing wrong with you, Danny." She explained because I was sick for most of my childhood, I never got to spend time with the other kids, which meant I still had lots to learn about communication. Mr. White started cornering Mom at the stairs a lot. She said he must have been listening for her. She started tiptoeing. This worked for a while, but then he started knocking on our door. He'd say things like, "Is the water pressure okay?" or "Did everybody's internet drop or just mine?" One afternoon, I heard a commotion from my bedroom and went down the hall. Our apartment door opened onto the lounge. Standing there, Mr. White said, "You're busy watching him again? What's the matter with that boy anyway? Danny's very sick. What? Can't you let him off the leash for one night?" "I'm sorry." So he'd old enough to grow a mustache, but can't wipe his own F-word and G-ass. After Mom slammed the door, we made eye contact. She asked how much I heard. I said everything. I could tell by her tone she was upset, so I gave her a big hug. I told her if Mr. White made her cry again, I'd beat him up, and that made her smile. Then I said I'd tear his stomach open and rip his innards out, and she told me I'd gone too far. A few days later, I got startled awake by somebody pounding the door. My brain clouds meant it was hard to follow what happened, but Mr. White kept screaming the word dog over and over. In the morning, Mom wouldn't tell me about their argument, but Amanda came over with a bottle of wine like the kind they serve at the hotel. Mom told me to go to my room, but I hid in the hall instead. Mr. White was annoyed about the yappy F-word running around our apartment. He said he heard a dog's toenails click across the floor, which would be his roof. Amanda heard this and knew he meant Benji, but was terrified what would happen if Mr. White found out. "Benji's all I've got," she said through tears. Mom hugged her and told her not to worry. Mr. White started causing lots of trouble. Mom said she always smelled alcohol on his breath, and when people had too much alcohol at the hotel, that's when the doorman kicked them out. One night, I woke up to Mom screaming, "Do you see a doggy bowl anywhere around her? Or how about a leash?" Blood was thumping in my ears, and their loud voices were so painful. I squeezed my eyes shut and silently counted to 10, making my mind blank until my head stopped hurting. In the morning, Amanda brought us cookies. "I don't understand how he can still hear Benji," she said. "I've soundproofed the apartment." She offered to help with our rent, but Mom said no. She said Mr. White was probably just making excuses to be angry because she wouldn't F-word him. Later, she explained to me we needed to stay on our best behavior because that B-word would have used any reason to evict us. In April, Mr. White started pounding the door one night. I got up and went to the lounge, where Mom was looking through the keyhole. She whispered for me to go back to bed, but I didn't want to leave her. I had my phone in my hand. I mouthed the word police, but she winced like she'd been punched in the gut and shook her head. I heard a noise of a key in the lock. Then Mr. White came in. He talked all funny, like the drunk people at the hotel. He grabbed Mom by the hair, and I got so mad I clenched my fists. He looked at me and then laughed. He leaned in close and said, "What, you're gonna be a big man now?" His breath tasted so awful it almost made me throw up. I don't remember what happened next, but blood was trickling down the side of Mr. White's face. He wiped a red smear away with his hand and then knocked me to the floor. He kept hitting me and hitting me. Then he lifted the corner of his shirt and I saw a knife. But before he could grab it, Mom jumped on his back. He slammed her backwards against the wall, and for a second it looked as if he was going to kill her, but instead he spat in her face. "One more problem, and you and that F-wording moron are gone." He screamed in her face, then stormed off. Afterwards, Mom was so upset she couldn't speak. Amanda came over, and when she saw blood everywhere, said we needed to call the police. Mom freaked out. She got all serious and said, "I need to tell you something." Amanda stitched up a cut on top of my skull and then gave me tablets to make it not hurt anymore. Afterwards, they told me to stay in bed, but my head hurt so much I couldn't sleep. I lay there, tossing and turning until I needed to use the bathroom. From the kitchen, I heard Mom and Amanda's voices and peeked through the gap in the door. Amanda looked surprised. Mom showed Amanda something on her phone. After that, Amanda walked around while Mom kept saying, "It's true?" Then Amanda agreed to not call the police. She said she'd help change the locks so Mr. White couldn't get in. Because I couldn't work for a long time, bills started piling up on the kitchen table, and Mom bought a different kind of Coke, one that didn't taste as good whenever we went shopping. She started biting her nails too. Every time I thought about Mr. White, I got angry. Then I felt bad for feeling angry. I said we should call the police so they'd come and arrest him, but she said nobody would believe us, and we'd just get evicted anyway. So I had the idea to install a security camera. That way, if he caused more trouble, we'd have proof. After my bruises healed, I worked extra hard at the hotel until I'd saved enough money from tips. I installed the camera on the cabinet in the corner. I angled it so you could see the front door, the wall, part of the sofa, and the window at the front of the apartment. I knew Mom would be furious if she found out what I'd done, so I hid the power cable behind a row of dusty books she never read. It wasn't long before I felt the storm clouds setting in again. I spent several days in bed with Mom, bringing me my meals, until one night I woke up drenched in sweat, twitching and whining. From somewhere nearby, I heard Mom scream. It felt like I might explode, and the haze got way worse. After that, all I remember is darkness. I woke up in bed with vomit all over myself. I cried and called for Mom, but she didn't appear. I dragged myself into the lounge, where her and Amanda mopped the floor. Mom reacted like she was watching a scary movie when she noticed me. The front door wasn't sitting right, and a lamp was broke. "What happened?" I asked, confused. She practically marched me into bed. She said she didn't want me making my condition worse, but I could tell from her voice she was keeping a secret. A big one. She dabbed my head with a wet cloth, promising there was nothing to worry about. The second she left me alone, I pulled up the camera footage on my phone. It started with Mr. White hammering the door, his voice muffled and unclear. Mom begged him to leave. There was a sound of him trying his key, and then his voice got even louder. The door bounced in its frame until it crashed open and slammed against the inside wall. Mom threw her arm across the doorway, creating a barrier, but Mr. White backhanded her to the floor. She threw her arms around his waist and prayed like people do in church, and for a second he looked as if he might leave. Then I crawled in a frame and hit his ankles with my hands. I was so sick I don't even remember doing it. Mr. White grabbed my hair and pulled out his knife, but before he could use it, Mom grabbed a lamp and hit him on the head, so he grabbed her by the throat and pushed her against the wall. I crawled out of the frame, crying. Mom's eyes bulged out of her skull and her face went bright red, and I thought she was going to die. But then a gray fuzz ball hit him and sent him tumbling across the floor. The gray thing took up a lot of the frame. I couldn't make it out so well in the dark, but some clouds must have gone away because lots of moonlight shone through the window, and I realized it was a really big wolf. Its mouth was like a cavern, and the sharp fangs sank into Mr. White's scalp, and then blood poured down his face. The wolf turned to Mom and licked her hand. She ran her fingers through the thick fur on top of its head. A little later, Mrs. Armstrong appeared in the doorway. At first, she looked shocked, but then Mom waved her over and she approached the wolf nervously. She scratched the wolf behind its ear. Afterwards, Mom buried her head in her hands, sobbing. Amanda grabbed a severed arm and waved it like a stick, shouting, "Here, Danny," until the wolf followed her out of frame. Amanda returned with a bucket and a mop. I scrolled ahead in the footage. The two of them got rid of Mr. White and then cleaned until I appeared, asking what happened. Now I'm still here in bed, and honestly, I am so scared. I don't think the wolf would hurt me because it didn't hurt Mom or Amanda, so I think maybe it only hurts people who cause trouble. I guess she didn't want me to call the police in case they found the wolf. I don't know why Mom wouldn't tell me about it though. I know animals get weird around me, but I think we'd maybe be good friends since we have the same name. I'm nervous we might get evicted, but maybe not because Mr. White is dead. I love Mom more than the world, so I'm obviously not going to do anything to get her in trouble, but I'm still really scared and confused. Anyway, thanks for reading my story. Hopefully I figure things out soon.